Hello, stationery friends. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the sketching that I've been up to recently and which stationery tools I've been using for that. My next Grail Pen consideration, or purchase consideration I should say, and ink explosions, amongst other stationery updates which I'm sure I'm going to be sneaking in. At the beginning of the year, I decided to change up my traveler's notebook for a couple of reasons. One, I took the weekly memo out of this and started focusing on the Hobonichi A6 for my planning as a bit of an experimentation just to see how I would like it. And the other reason was because I had committed to wanting to improve my sketching skills and learn how to draw a few more different elements. So what I ended up doing was, as I mentioned, taking out the weekly memo and sticking in a sketch refill from Traveler's Notebook, or Traveler's Company, sketch notebook insert or refill. My favorite sketching and watercolor refill is the watercolor refill from Traveler's Company. However, the sketch offers a few more sheets, and I really decided that I wanted to focus only on black and white sketching. And so I've been keeping a sketchbook on me, which has been fantastic, obviously, within the Traveler's Notebook, just in terms of mobility. And I've been experimenting with some on the scene or in nature sketching here. I started off with the idea of that I would be primarily pencil sketching. And so I bought myself a Blackwing pencil. It's a soft lead. I don't remember what the number is, but the soft graphite just gave me the ability to try and mess around with some shading and color variation within the sketch, which I really liked. And curiously enough, at the same time, I realized that because it's so soft, it tends to smudge quite easily and even transfer some of the pencil over to the backing of the other sheet. And so instantaneously I got paranoid that my beautiful, wonderful, amazing artistic sketches were getting smudged and I'd lose that clarity, and that of course they would overlap with other sheets in the sketch notebook here. So what I ended up doing was switching to my other favorite drawing instrument, which are the pigment markers. I love pigment markers because they're water resistant and they don't smudge. Depending on the line width, I should say they don't smudge. And what I meant by the line width is if you get a thicker line, there is a moment or two, just a little bit longer for dry time. But once it's dry, it doesn't smudge. So waterproof or water resistant, depending on which company tells you as such. This company here is Sakura, and their numbering system for the line width is different. So I've got a 10, 5, and 3. The 10 is a 0.6 line, the 5 is a 0.45 millimeter line, and the 3 is a 0.35 millimeter line. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about pigment markers. The numbering system doesn't necessarily equate to the line width. Faber-Castell very clearly on their pen say a 0.5 millimeter line, and it is a 0.5 millimeter line width. And I have one Faber-Castell pigment marker. Again, the beauty or the benefit of the pigment marker and how they work is that the ink itself is suspended particles, and so when you lay down a line, it really bonds to the paper and prevents any water. If it's exposed to any water, prevents any water runoff or smudging and bleeding. I also like the fact that pigment markers typically just give a very consistent line, and I think that's really good. Depending on the type, these pigment markers have just it's incredibly hard to tell in the video here, but have a very consistent nub or tip, and so it'll give you that consistency in line drawing. So I switched over to pigment markers and I've been absolutely loving it. This is a few scenes that I typically do. This was my wife skating, a Zentangle, and then at the zoo with an owl. And I've just really enjoyed that ability to be in the moment, to sketch when I want to. And just like anything else that you want to get better at, it takes practice, it takes some intention, and it takes the follow-through action. My son, seeing how much I've been enjoying sketching, decided to take the opportunity to ask a favor of me. He had this concept in mind for a video or a movie that he's making, and he really wanted to describe this world that he had built up in this movie. And so he asked me to help him to draw a map. The idea being very similar to that scene in Lord of the Rings where the introduction shows Middle Earth and the Shire and Rohan, Gondor, and Mordor with a whole vast landscape and different viewpoints or important areas within the map. So he wanted me to recreate something like that. I said, of course, I'd be happy to help. I didn't realize what a detailed vision he had in mind and how elaborate this would be. From what he described originally, I thought it was going to be on a simple 11 by 17 type size paper. But very quickly, once he described his entirety of his idea, he wanted a sprawling map that would span our dining room table. So what we ended up doing was taking one of the cheap rolls from IKEA for kids. They've got a paper roll that you can just roll across and cut to size, and laid it across the table. When we started, he had this concept of a modern city surrounded by a circular wall, and then from the left to right of the map, he wanted the modernity to phase out into kind of an instantaneous medieval steampunk era, and all the way into an ocean. As I mentioned, I didn't realize how detailed of a vision he had, and so I kept the city fairly simplistic, thinking that we were going to keep the idea being quite large in perspective. But the more we went right, the more he wanted me to add a few different elements, and I realized I had to really up my game in terms of the detailing, the type of building, the type of scenery that he wanted to show, because he was going to record this video and he really wanted to be able to zoom in to the specific area of the map that he at that point was going to show in that scene. It's become quite a fun thing. As soon as his siblings are in bed, he and I will sit at the dining table after work, and he'll sit there describing what he wants to see, and I'll sit there sketching away, trying to make sure that it comes close to what he had in mind. And it's been a really good opportunity for me to practice my sketching skills. It's been fun to play with perspective, this idea of a river that he wanted to flow through the map in and out from foreground to background. So anytime that I wasn't working on his map, I was sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to work on some of the ideas he had in mind? And so I took my sketchbook and I've been just trying out different elements. The forests and trees in particular are my nemesis because I never know how to show that vast, sprawling detail. And so I did what any good parent would do, research on how to do certain things, I guess. And I went onto the internet and got some ideas. So I can't take complete credit for some of the inspiration in these elements, things like cliffs and buildings and mountains. I tried to recreate some of it, and then I just added my own flair in terms of what I thought would look very close to what I wanted to see. And then I started really messing around with just things that popped into my mind based on what my son has been describing. So map sketching has been really, really fun. It's been a great way to just get that habit of sketching built up. I love the fact that I have my traveler's notebook on me when I'm at work. If I've got a few moments at lunch, I'll whip it out and just think about, okay, what are we going to do that night, or what can I foresee he's going to ask me and see if I can just sketch out a couple of rough outlines and then work on the map. And as the detailed vision has been coming more and more clear, now my son's decided that I need to rework some of the original elements because they're not quite as good as the newer elements, because I've been refining and really trying to practice this craft here. So we're probably going to find a spot to cut the map out and recreate his city with a lot more detail. Now that, as he has quote unquote told me, now that you're better, Dad, it'd be really good to just update those elements in that. The other thing that I've been really contemplating is my next Grail fountain pen purchase. I have this idea in my mind of what I want, and I've been wanting to get out to Japan. It's on my bucket list for places to travel. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I'm still probably a few years out from that, unless something changes. However, I have a friend who's heading over to Japan, and I took the opportunity to take advantage of his visit, particularly to Tokyo, and asked if he'd kindly consider, if he has time, to pop into one of the stationery stores there and pick up a pen for me. Pilot in particular is the pen, and it's the customs. The two that I have been debating are the Pilot Custom 823 in amber versus the Pilot Custom 743. What I ended up asking my friend to pick up, and hopefully he can, is the Custom 743. For one primary reason. I love the look of the amber of the Custom 823. It's a gorgeous looking pen. Definitely, I think out of the two, that's where my aesthetic would gravitate towards naturally. However, being the piston filler that it is, I have been researching a lot about how to clean the pen out, and there's some difficulty in doing that. Where I'm going with this is I love to change my inks in my pens frequently. I like to mix it up. I like to try different inks in the same pen over and over, just to see if it'll be a good pen-ink combination. I don't think there's a pen in my fountain pen kit or collection where I haven't changed out the ink at least once or twice. It's a bit of a habit, I suppose. And what I tend to do, especially in cartridge converters, is not fill the whole converter up unless I'm absolutely convinced I'm going to use up all the ink in one go. And as soon as I decide that I don't like that ink pen combination, I'll squirt out the remaining ink back into the ink bottle, give it a clean. Sometimes not, but more often than not I do, unless the color that I want to switch to is fairly similar, and fill it up again. That being said, the 823, everything I've researched, if you're inclined like me, is not necessarily the pen you want to gravitate towards. I think it's a beautiful pen, it's fantastic, it's clearly got a strong cult following. However, the Custom 743 has the ability to take the Con 70 converter. Actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. It comes with the Con 70 converter. And what I like about that idea right off the bat is I can be very comfortable in changing the ink, giving it a good flush in the nib, and making sure that everything is working consistently. So I've asked my friend to pick up a 743 custom in black. I hope he's able to. If not, no hard feelings. But if he is, then I'd be very, very excited. And the thing with Asian pens, particularly the Pilot, they've got a different numbering system. And Brian Goulet, if you're ever curious, as well as a ton of other amazing YouTubers. I think Yoseka Stationery has done such a great job of showing the line variations and the line width variations in the Pilot numbering system on their nibs. Go check them out. I highly recommend that. I have a thing where I like, depending on the pen that I use and the intended purpose, I generally like medium nibs, particularly Western medium. And as I've talked about before, there's a lot of variation in even the medium nib definition. So some err on 0.5 millimeters, some are closer to 0.7. It also depends on the paper you're using, the ink that you're using, the size of the nib, whether it's a number 5, number 6, in terms of standard conventional numbering, or if it's a number 15 or a number 12, if I remember correctly, in Pilot's lineup, as well as the size of the feed. So there's a lot of elements that contribute to what a medium nib is. After plenty of research and the fact that I can't test out the Pilot customs, at least where I live, I have asked my friend to pick up a custom medium because I'm largely thinking that I'm going to use it for long form journaling. And perhaps if I like the pen, and obviously if I get it, I'll do an unboxing and a review. If I like it, this potentially is the start of a journey of collecting Pilot fountain pens. I've heard great things. I love the look. I'm very excited, and I hope that opportunity pans out. But I'm curious, if you have experience with the Custom 743, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. Do you like it? Do you love it? I still have, I think, a week to cancel if I hear from you folks that it's not a great pen. But everything I've read on the internet seems to be indicating that it's going to be a fantastic pen, and I'm very, very excited to get my hands on it. Perhaps that is the only Grail pen purchase of the year. I may also be inclined to another Esterbrook pen. I think they're fantastic, and as I mentioned, another Benu pen, particularly the Earl Grey from Goulet. The Benu, sorry, let me clarify. The Benu limited edition for Goulet pen specifically, which is the Earl Grey. I think such a gorgeous pen, and I'd be inclined to pick one up. If not for me, definitely for my wife. Speaking about changing inks frequently, if you're anything like me, you've got ink on your hands because you do, because you're changing out inks quite a bit. You're messing around with refilling your pens, and things can get messy sometimes. My wife was laughing at me last week, and she even took a photo of my hands because I don't know what I was doing. I was changing out the pen, but I wasn't thinking very clearly. I ended up twisting the converter the wrong direction, and instead of sucking it in, I ended up pushing it out, and it went all over my hands. And depending on the ink that you're working with, some are really good at staining, and so there was a few days where my fingers were just blue, and no matter how much I scrubbed with soap, it just took a while to come out. A couple of coworkers have mentioned that my hands are always covered in colors, and they think that I'm a painter or an artist in that way. When I explain that it's fountain pen ink, of course, there's usually the blank stares of what are you talking about? So it's a great opportunity to explain to them all about the world of fountain pens and fountain pen inks. I really like that about fountain pens. That's something that very much gravitated, or which pulled me towards fountain pens, other than the beautiful aesthetics. And I've talked about this in another video. When I was growing up out of Canada, primarily in British immersion schools, they had a big ceremony, and I don't think they do this anymore. They had a big ceremony in grade 3, a bit of a ritual, that up until grade 3, you would only be given a pencil to write with and draw with. And you would take cursive writing classes. What ended up happening in grade 3 was you would eventually get evaluated by a teacher to see whether you would be good and consistent in your cursive writing with very few mistakes, and that it was very clear. And if that happened, if your teacher deemed that you were good enough, they would bestow upon you your fountain pen. And I remember this distinctly in my mind, the first time I received this blue Parker fountain pen, my mind was blown. I was really, really taken away with the beauty of this pen, the nib. And the fact that there was such a ritual and ceremony around it, I think really added to the weight of the beauty, and that this idea of just a rite of passage. Somehow I was now deemed more older in the eyes of the adults, and and to be given the responsibility of a fountain pen seemed to really solidify this psyche change. That's quite heavy and deep, I guess, to attribute to that, but that's what it felt like at the time, and it still does, actually. I remember the Parker fountain pen receiving that, and they walked me through how to refill the ink. It was a cartridge pen, if I remember correctly, so that's what I mean by refill the ink, changing out cartridges. They walked us through how to clean and flush out the pen, put it back together, and then, of course, you wrote with the Parker fountain pen the rest of the time. And I also like the idea of the commitment that ink implied, because any mistake would be very obvious. I couldn't hide it. I couldn't erase it. I would have to strike it out. And if I was writing a story or presenting an answer, I would have to put in that workbook all the mistakes right there and present that to my teacher. And I remember my grade 3 teacher, she was quite stern. I remember that. But one of the things that she said to me that still sticks with me is she also said, because I was feeling a bit ashamed about how many mistakes I had in one written essay thing that I was presenting to her. But she said to me, here is the journey of getting to the end goal. And your mistakes, while it looks like you have a lot here, also show just how hard you were trying. And that really stuck with me. It's a bit of a diatribe, I guess, into fountain pens and inks, but it's always stuck with me. When I came over to Canada, I was surprised that we were given Bic pens, which I absolutely hated, and I was on a search and a quest in university to find a fountain pen again, or something that recreated a fountain pen. And it was many years later that my wife bought me my first fountain pen when I turned 30. There's a bit of a story to that, but regardless, I love fountain pens. I love messing around with inks, and I think the different types of inks and the ink catalog out there for fountain pens is just absolutely incredible. The color variations, the themes, the ability to have sheens and shimmers, just such a world of exploration. Inksplosions, so happens quite frequently around me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I probably am doing quite a lot of things wrong and cheating out my inks. I tend to be in a rush, and I'll write with a pen until it's absolutely dry, and then halfway through, it'll always be inevitably halfway through some task that requires the fountain pen, so I'll rush over to my ink collection, pull it out, and quickly just fill it back in. And if I'm not thinking very clearly, or if it's really early in the morning, I'll twist the converter the wrong way and get an ink mess everywhere, especially on my hands. My desk certainly has quite a lot of splotches of ink residue, which I have tried to wipe out, but still remains. I think it's really cool just because it's now kind of like one of those painter's easels that has flecks of paint everywhere. That's what my desk is starting to look like, little dots of ink everywhere. And perhaps in 5 years, my nice orange desk pad is just going to look like a representation of some incredible artist's vision of a multicolored plethora of a canvas used. On a completely unrelated note, but somewhat related, I suppose, to analog tools and analog lifestyle, I made a commitment to myself a couple of years ago to start reading again. I love reading. I love reading books. I love the idea of sitting down with a book and just immersing yourself into a story or into nonfiction. And I found a few years ago I was just so busy in my life I wasn't making time to actually have downtime. It was always gravitating towards the Netflix or TV or something like that with the family, and those are all good things. But I really wanted to just start reading again. I love paper books. I love the feel of paper. My wife and I, before kids, we had a ton of bookshelves in our house. They're all in the basement now, but they used to be on the main floor. And we were very proud that we had a library of the books that we were reading. Built our little reading nook and all that. Moved into the basement because we're sharing our space with our kids now, and we need a little more space for their toys and things like that. Not that I'm lamenting or anything like that. Regardless, I decided to start reading again a couple of years ago. I primarily read nonfiction just because I'm trying to learn lots of new things. And I was staying away from fiction for quite some time until probably just recently with some of the health stuff that was going on. I had a little bit more downtime, I guess, than I had anticipated. And so I started picking up a few more fiction books, everything from kind of Japanese authors to fictitious or historical fiction type of books. One of my favorite Japanese authors is Haruki Murakami. Just some of the weird, surreal elements of his books on how he combines spirituality, his Japanese culture, obviously, with a very poignant story more often than not. And the challenge that he imposes on the audience, where it doesn't necessarily resolve completely with a bow tie every single time. Certainly it resolves to a conclusion, but some of his books, you're sitting there going, well, what did that mean earlier on in the story? He didn't actually quite explain that. And I think that's quite nice and refreshing, honestly. Anyhow, so lots of fiction and reading. There's a couple books that I'm reading right now, or one I just finished up, which is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I won't spoil anything, but it's historical fiction, although very representative of the World War II, and the story revolves around a Korean family in Japan, or the migration to Japan, and all of the historical elements in there, which unfortunately ring true and show you just the harsh conditions that this particular family goes through, but very reflective of just the general sense of things at the time, and some elements that still reside to today. Just a beautiful read and very fascinating. I think they even made an Apple TV series on the book, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. The other one that I'm reading right now is a book called Ascension. I love a good sci-fi. I binged the Wheel of Time series. I'm taking a bit of a step back, I guess, by Robert Jordan in January there, which I was quite surprised about. I haven't read fantasy since Lord of the Rings in junior high and high school. And I just really enjoyed reading fantasy with some sci-fi elements in there, which I thought was really cool. So the Robert Jordan series, the Wheel of Time series, which I thought was really neat. I love Dune. I've talked about that. I read that when I was a kid. And I revisited some of that in anticipation of reading or watching Dune 2. Back to the book that I'm currently reading, which is called Ascension by Nicholas Binge. A mysterious mountain shows up in the middle of nowhere with a team of scientists who move or relocate to the mountain to try and solve the mystery of how this mountain appeared. Again, I won't spoil anything, but I really like it. I guess why I'm talking about books a lot more, I guess, on this channel is because it is very much related to analog tools, so it's not completely unrelated as I originally started out here. And I really do think that there is such a correlation between reading a lot and writing a lot. The two seem to be correlated. Generally, I suppose that's a very stereotypical or generalist statement to make. So if it doesn't apply, don't worry about it. And I could be wrong, which I probably am. But either way, for me, reading a lot means I'm writing a lot, especially if I like passages in a book, I'll be writing that in my notebooks. So I mentioned I like paper books. I like the feel of paper, that tactile sensation. I love the weight of a book in my hands, but I do travel a lot. And the thing that changed my life and changed the ability or increased the ability to read a lot more was picking up a Kindle. I wasn't sure about the idea of a Kindle just because of the digital format, and I had an experience with the Kindle when they first came out many, many years ago. I was gifted a Kindle and it just wasn't for me. It didn't feel right. I didn't like the light coming out of it. The fact that it was so thin, I always just gravitated back towards the paper book or the hardcover book. But with the increased amount of travel, he picked up a Kindle a year ago now. And it's changed my life. It's really helped bring in additional reading time. I'll read in the airport, on the plane, in the hotel where I'm at. And then what I really like about this is I can carry a ton of books on me. So as soon as I finish a book, I don't even have to worry about which book is going to be my next book because I've already got a catalog ready to go. I also really like it for nonfiction books as well, because then I can refer to it on the go as opposed to hauling a bunch of books around. I still prefer paper books, the opportunity that I can get, any opportunity I can get, although the Kindle has really increased my ability to read frequently. And what I like about this is, especially with the busy lifestyle a parent can have, you're on the go quite a bit. Any moment I can steal with me or myself, I will whip out the Kindle and just read for a few minutes. What I really like about this, of course, is that I can stick it into my everyday carry bag, regardless of whether I'll be spending most of my time on a Saturday or a Sunday reading out of a paper book. It's in my carry bag, and if I find myself at a restaurant and there's a quiet moment somehow between all the kids, I'll whip out my Kindle and read off of it. So I've really, really enjoyed the Kindle. The other thing that I like doing with it is borrowing books from the library, so I don't have to purchase a bunch of books right now, which is great. It certainly helps from a budget perspective in a world of ever increasing costs and demands on where your money is being spent. So I've got a membership, a library membership down in the States that I can leverage to borrow books onto my. Lastly, I just want to thank everybody for sending your really beautiful, kind messages and comments to me about my health concerns. I really appreciate it. I'm happy and proud to say that I think I am fully on the upswing now. I had a sip of coffee last weekend, and this weekend I'm going to have my first full cup of coffee. I love coffee. I can't get enough of coffee. I went about 3.5 months without coffee there, which was absolutely terrifying and quite revealing as well. I just heard my stomach grumble, so I think I'm going to grab some breakfast. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and bye for now.